Buenos días, ¿cómo estamos?
Buenos días, buenos días, buenos días.
Good morning to you. How's everything going?
This is what the third sábado de cuarentena, así que ya tengo la barba larga, el pelo largo, las uñas largas.
Has it really been that long here? Because it's only been 2 weeks in Italy, and they started way before us.
Yeah, but the thing is, since I traveled to Costa Rica that weekend, so when I came back, I came back on a Monday, so I stayed home from work just because I was exposed to people from Italy and all over the world.
Yeah.
So I self quarantined here. And then, and part of the other part was because my wife was sick too. So I wasn't sure is it just her illness or just the regular travel trouble bug that you pick up in the on an airplane because you're so confined, or is it something else? Because I did have to do um, customs in Panama, so it was a whole mess. But anyway, so that's one of the reasons I've been home a little longer than most people. But I
You
think this is the second week or working fully remotely, so that's the new experience for me.
yeah, you were ahead of the curve when you self-quarantined
Hmm.
because it wasn't until last week that we started getting the alerts. I've been getting text messages. Have you been getting text messages from the
Yeah,
city?
I've been getting messages through, I think it's the iPhone platform. So whatever they use to do Amber alerts or just send information to
Yeah.
all iPhone users, I've been getting those texts.
The first thing I thought when I got those text messages was, how do they get my number, and who authorized them to send me these messages? But I suppose if it's a national emergency,
Yes,
they'll
sir.
use that as a justification.
Hey, you know the airwaves are not yours, right? I mean,
Yeah,
that's a public good managed by the government. So that's the intrinsic role that the government plays, which is interesting to kind of see how everything's playing out. But I think before we get into what's going on, I think you should tell our viewers and our listeners about the brown perspective and how they can connect with us or see some of our previous shows.
yeah. So you see on the screen here, I have these other videos that I've uploaded in the last week or two, and for those that didn't follow us from the beginning, which is virtually no one, we ended up recording a whole bunch of podcasts, and we uploaded them initially to a different YouTube channel, but then we decided to go with this one. And I've been uploading them. I've made making sure that the audio quality is good and changing them. So in the last week or two, I uploaded these, which we had recorded not too long ago. It was sometime late
Lady
last year.
Frijol.
Yeah, we did
It
one.
seems like a long time ago.
Yeah, this one. And we did the gentrification in LA. We did this one with R. Kelly, which is really interesting because the whole thing with R. Kelly blew up sometime last year, and it's supposed to have died down by now, especially with the coronavirus taking all the headlines. But I uploaded this last week, was it? And it has 13
Oh, 13
views.
views.
And look, I know it doesn't seem like a lot, but considering that all of our other videos don't really have any other views, this is, if you were to chart this like graph it the way that we graph the coronavirus, this has spiked. This is the way the coronavirus has spiked in the US.
Hashtag we went viral.
Yeah, exactly, with R. Kelly. So somebody is still really interested in looking up R. Kelly. Someone
Yeah.
out there. Maybe it's people in their homes with nothing else to do.
And also, so you know, we haven't really even told our family or friends that we're doing this. So it's not like we've made a promotion, promoted the content. Yeah. So that whoever that person or persons are, they're complete strangers who are now connected to us somehow.
Yeah, which is good because, and I even considered if this was me when I uploaded this podcast, but it's not because I don't do anything different when I upload these. I upload them and maybe I click on them once to make sure they play, but I don't go back and click on them over and over. And so at most you would see one or two views from me when I upload them, not 13. So it's a good sign of things to come.
It's a good baseline.
Yeah.
So
So
remember, follow
yeah,
us.
going back to, we started talking about the coronavirus, and I think by now it's pretty obvious that that's what we are going to focus on. It's the topic that's on everyone's mind, and we covered this 2 weeks ago. But what's happened in the last 2 weeks, it the rate of change is so accelerated that things look completely different today than they did 2 weeks ago. So we can just sync up and talk about what's going on in Italy. Now it's come home. There's repercussions. You have the Fed going in and bailing everybody out. Man, there's so much.
Well, you got Congress going on too, yeah.
Yeah, there's so much that's going on with
There
this.
is, and I think that we were talking earlier, like whether people are tired of coronavirus or maybe they're ready for something else. I think the reality is both. I think people, because this is such a new experience, that I think people now are realizing that this is serious and are sort of wanting to know what's going on and also kind of wanting to understand, okay, how did this happen? Why is this going on? So I think there's still an opportunity for everybody just to kind of not only know what's going on, but I feel like a lot of people are processing this experience, this shared experience of being stuck at home and not being able to really have physical contact with a whole lot of people.
Yeah, it's interesting that you said that if people are tired of it and they just want to get over it, which is true. Both of those are true, but in situations like this, they don't really have a choice.
Yep.
And this is the first time for a lot of this generation that they see what it is to go through collectively as a nation. And now you have lockdowns, you have there's so many things that are new, that are
Yeah.
first.
And it's
And
funny because to me, it's bringing in my perspective as an East Coast person, like growing up in the East Coast. The first part of this reminded me of a snowstorm, right? So and when they start telling you there's a big storm coming, get ready. That's where you go to the store, you get ready, you hunker down, and it's usually 2 to 3 days, 4 days if it's really bad that you're stuck at home. So the first part of that reminded me of a snow days and dealing with a snowstorm. But now that I live in Los Angeles, I know that people don't never have that experience really, unless obviously if you live in the mountains you do. But if you live in the LA Basin area, you don't have that experience. It's the first time that I think a lot of people have felt what it is to be stuck at home because of a natural emergency.
the only one that I can think of here in LA was the school was locked down. And it's not like the school was locked down and they told us not to go to school. We were inside the school, and the school was
Oh,
locked down because there was a shooter, or there was a shooting down the street at the Tams Burgers. Apparently something went down, and then the police showed up, and then they locked down the school for a while. That's the only memory that I have of a lockdown. I don't think I recall, like you said, ever being locked in at home. But
hmm,
when we were in college, if you recall, we had the snow days as well, when a storm blizzard
yep,
would come through. And I think when I was reading about coronavirus initially, a lot of people took it in that same way, the way that you take it when you're in college, where if a storm comes in, especially if you're somewhere where it snows, the storm comes in, and all of a sudden classes are canceled, which means
hmm,
you're no more tests, at least homework, or if you had finals or midterms coming, that everything gets pushed up, and it's this huge relief when it comes through, that
yeah.
you're glad that it came through, because it's gonna give you a break to obviously do nothing but keep procrastinating, right? You were
Yeah, instead of working on that, reading that book, working on that paper, you decide just to hang out with friends and
Yeah,
relax.
I remember the first time that there was the classes were canceled because of a snowstorm. We had been up all night. Well, I had been up all night studying for a test, and then the next day, well, school was canceled. So instead of going to bed to sleep and rest, because obviously the school was going to be open the next day or the day after, we went to the cafeteria with some friends, and we were literally there all day.
All day
We were
at the
there.
ratty.
Yeah, we were there for breakfast, and then somehow breakfast stretched into lunch, and then people started flowing in for lunch, and we just started hanging out with them, and we ate lunch. By the time we left, it was like 3 or 4 p.m., and then it was like sleep deprived, and then still had to study, and then probably went back to the room and watched MTV or did some other stuff and did more procrastination. But
That's
that's
funny.
the fun nature of a snowstorm, and that's how people were taking it here at first. But then
Um,
people were told to don't go to work. Now, I think in LA next week it's going to affect the public transportation system as well. It's going to get shut down,
mm.
because up until now it's still running. And let's see what else. Yeah,
Yeah, the fact. And I
Yeah.
think the fact that, New York and LA, California are sort of ahead of this thing, right? So we're like experiencing what countries like China, Italy, and others have experienced. So it's kind of weird to be that pioneer state for the rest of the country.
Yeah, and in this instance, New York is way ahead of us though, because was it a week ago that half of the cases in the U.S. were still in New York? I
Yeah.
don't know what the number is now, but I would think there's still a big portion of those cases are still in New York, and the United States is the first country to reach 100,000 cases. By the way, we've
Yeah. So
surpassed
sh
China.
Yeah, and so shout out to our people in New York. Both of us have close ties to New York. I mean, you lived in New York for a number of years. We know that people are struggling and dealing with this there too. So anybody who finds themselves in New York, anywhere else in the East Coast, our thoughts are with you.
Yeah, and we need to talk a little bit about how all of those people are getting affected, despite what the government has done to try to bail essentially everyone out. There's
Hmm.
there's always a delay, and then there's specific sectors where people are not going to get any type of relief, and so
Yeah.
eventually that's going to have consequences on the economy.
Yeah, I mean, I know it was the Fed chair this week who said that, it's very likely that we are already in a depression, um, or a recession.
Recession. I don't
Obviously,
think they would use the
it's
word
a
depression.
recession, and it may become a depression depending on how long this goes. But certainly a recession, and I think that, yeah, because there's a lot of, yes, there's some aid coming in. Some people are going to be using savings. Other lucky ones get a chance to work from home, so they're sort of still able to help the economy. But unless, if goes on for at least, I think the latest estimate I heard was about 12 more weeks. That's 3 months. I mean, that's going to be a significant pausing of the economy. So there's no doubt we're going to be impacted by it.
Yeah, they wouldn't come on TV and say depression. 'Cause the last thing they want to do is scare people. And then
Yeah, and that's one of the reasons the current administration is trying to say, "Hey, we'll be back before, by Easter Sunday," because they realize that the longer this goes, the deeper the economy is going to go into a hole, and the longer it's going to take for us to recover, and it's probably going to happen all around the election. So obviously, bad economy, recession, um, style during the elections, that's no bueno for the incumbent, or incumbents in this case. So that that's the other angle of this, not only impacting the economy, is going to impact politics, and that's going to even further impact the economy. Is going to impact the response that we get moving forward, and who benefits it and who doesn't.
yeah, but Trump hasn't really grasped the severity of this, and I can see a situation where everyone around him tries to tell him the what things are really like and the risks
Mm-hmm.
that we're under, and he just it goes in one ear and out the other, and then he
Mm-hmm.
gets on in front of that podium and he tells people that he thinks that we can reopen within 2 weeks, which is completely unrealistic. And you're seeing a situation with Trump where he can BS his way out of something.
Yeah.
Like in the past, he's been able to just say whatever. It may make sense, it may not make sense, but somehow he just um it's just like water off a duck's back. It doesn't hurt
Mm-hmm.
him in any way. But in this case, he has no control over it. He could say whatever he wants. He could say the country's going to be open again in 2 weeks, but in 2 weeks we're barely going to be hitting peak, or not even, right? And so there's no way that the country can open in 2 weeks. So even if he thinks that right now, saying that it's going to provide some momentarily relief, and maybe the stock market goes up because he says that, in 2 weeks it's just going to go back down again, because there's no way. So that guy has absolutely no clue what he's talking about. He cares about the stock market and getting reelected, and he's still trying to. I think he's still trying to appeal to the part of the electorate that think that this is getting overblown, because there's still
Yeah.
a lot of people that don't realize the issue with the hospitals, with the shortage of supplies and the ICUs, not having
He's a
enough beds.
Bolsonaro. He's a Bolsonaro of. So he's a Brazilian president right
Yeah,
now. He's
it,
trying to take that perspective, but the reality is that like the people, the gangsters in Brazil told people not to leave home after 8 o'clock.
Mm-hmm.
So it's like people themselves um are sort of enforcing this and realizing, this could be serious. Let's protect ourselves. And I know last week you made that point that that's what something similar that happened in Japan, or not Japan, in China, where people say, okay, we got this is important. We got to do it for ourselves. So the people themselves demand the action. But you make a good point. I think and you and I mean, really one of the first times that I interacted with a doctor that out of a patient physician relationship was at school, right? And then weird thing for me was getting to know a lot of people who were studying to be doctors. So that was the first time that I really was exposed to that profession, realized how hard, how much work it is, like, right, how smart you got to be a doctor, how difficult it is to become a doctor, how long it takes to become a doctor. And to say all that, so like, if you see people like that who are trained to be calm in during traumatic situations, and to make like fast life or death decisions, if those people are panicking and those people are like asking for our help, like, you need to pay attention, right? Because those are they're the really in the front lines of what's going on.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. They're the ones that are seeing it. For everyone else, it's just they're hearing from it and they're assuming. There's a lot of mistrust in the media establishment. So conservatives that voted for Trump are likely to think that the media is overhyping it.
Hmm.
And I'm not going to defend the media because they do overhype a lot of stuff, and it's in their interest to keep the American public scared.
Yeah.
But in this case, you're not just hearing it from the media; you're hearing it from the first respondents, as you said. And I even, as you were talking, I was pulling up these statistics or these figures to compare what the fatality rate is between the two viruses, and what people, at least the people that are not affected by it, the people that are seeing it from a distance, that they're home, they might be affected in the economic sense that maybe they're not going to work, maybe they're not going to the gym and doing what they normally do, but they don't really have people around them getting sick, and they're not
Hmm.
they don't have people in their family like I do that work in the medical field.
Yeah, like
So
this, like, unlike a snow day, you don't see the snow.
right,
You see calm outside of your
right.
house.
So what they think is this is just another virus that if I catch it, I'll get over it. And then
Hmm.
they think that why are people freaking out? Why are they making such a big deal about it? And there's some truth to that because if you look at the numbers for the coronavirus, that's why I was pulling this up. The flu, they're saying it's the death rate for the seasonal flu is around zero point zero 0.01. And if
Hmm.
you compare I don't have the actual statistics, but if you just look at Germany, right, the actual fatality rate is zero point zero 0.05. And I had read somewhere before that it was like zero point zero 0.04 or zero point zero 0.03. So it's like two or three times the rate of the flu. So it's definitely not 4% or 5%, the number that you were hearing before. It's a
Hmm.
lot lower than that. And so, yeah, if you get it, if you're young and you're healthy, and even if you're over 50 or 60, if you have a good immune system and you don't have any comorbidities, you're probably going to be okay with it. You're probably going to be okay. But that's not to say if you're going to give it to other people that are more vulnerable. But the real problem here that maybe some people don't understand is that the issue is that this something like Germany, it's at zero point zero 0.05 because up until now, whenever people get it, they probably catch it fast and then they go to the hospital and they get treated if they need to get treated. Once the hospital starts getting overcrowded and once the ICU unit runs out of beds and once the ambulance is not able to pick people up, and that could be because of the number of people that are overreacting and panicking and going to the emergency care because they think because they have a fever. It doesn't
Hmm.
matter what gets them and what gets the hospitals um what gets the number of people going to the hospitals, what makes that spike. What matters is that the resources are limited. So once you get into a situation like they got in Italy, where they really can give service to these people, you start getting fatality rates like 10%
Hmm.
because it's something else that's killing them. And not even that, other people that would have had any other life threatening emergencies, they can't get care because
Yeah.
there's not enough medical staff for them. And
Yes.
yeah,
Go finish your thought.
well, and again, that that might be attributed a bit to people panicking too, because
Hmm.
if it's twice as many people, well, I don't know how many people are uh, I don't know if it's the rate of infection is spreading faster than the flu, but if even if it's 2 times or 4 times higher than the flu, maybe that's all it takes to overrun
Hmm.
our medical system. And it's that overcapacity that we're not equipped for, and that's why this thing is getting so out of hand and so many people are dying, and that's why the overreaction from the governments as well, because it the virus itself in isolation with a healthy individual may not kill that individual, and the likelihood is very small. But it's when you blow that up to the whole population and the reaction and the resources that we have, that's when this thing becomes super deadly.
Yeah, but the interesting thing to me is it's almost an allegory of of the country and society, right? So in some ways, just like a healthy person, a healthy society has a good healthcare system. People are healthier because they have access to the right food, they can do exercise, they have access to healthcare. So people are healthy, and the healthier you are individually and as a society, something like this you can control, right? You have had the investments on the healthcare system. You People are educated, they don't panic, they sort of have some savings, they have jobs that provide them with sick leave or pay leave, etc. So it's healthy, they're able to withstand something like that. But in some ways, what this coronavirus is testing is the healthiness of our society, the healthiness of our health system, and then our individual healthiness. So I think that's to your point. Like right now, we're realizing like, oh, we're not as healthy as we thought. We're not as, oh, now I understand why having access to healthcare is so important, or why investing in and workforce and being prepared and having enough ventilators and equipment just in case something bad happens. Oh, that's important. So it just kind of changes perspective on something that otherwise could be a very normal, oh, this is just a flu that happens every year, we can plan for it, we can handle it, let's move on with our life.
Exactly. And you think Americans for the first time are finding out that they're not so healthy? I've always felt that we should already know that by now.
Yeah, but realizing, because that's the thing, like there's a bunch of people who are healthy, and those healthy privileged people don't realize what the other half looks like, or not even the other half, because I would, I don't know how many people. It will be interesting to learn how many people in the U.S. are considered healthy versus obese or with other mobilities. But this is also the thing, like you can be healthy, you can be wealthy, but if there's a significant number of people in your society who are not in the same position, that's going to devastate you, is going to impact you, and is eventually is going to really impact you, because it's going to impact your economy, it's going to impact your health, and may impact your ability to go about your daily life. So I think it also just sort of shows the inequalities between the haves and the have-nots, and the haves who have access to education, healthy food, healthcare systems, all these things, and the other people who don't.
Yeah, I'm glad you bring that up because it's very similar to the situation that is normally discussed in America, which is should we try to help those in the inner city, those that are less
Hmm.
privileged? Should we fund education? Should we make it easier for them to go to college and so forth? And a lot of people are usually opposed to that, and they're opposed to it because they feel like it's a handout that people don't that people there's enough opportunity in this country, so even if you're disadvantaged you should be able to take advantage of the opportunities that you have to make it ahead. And that's because these people live in wealthy neighborhoods. They don't have to live
Hmm.
in the inner city. They don't have to be exposed to the crime. It's only when the crime comes to them that they
Hmm.
realize that maybe they would have been better off if as a whole they would have implemented measures that make the society in general be well off, so that you don't have
Yep.
these huge dichotomies between the wealthy and then those that don't have anything. And in this situation, it's very similar, like you said, with the healthy people. Well, they're not feeling it. They get to work from home. They have savings. Maybe they're still well, I don't know if they get to work from home or not, but even if they're not working, they have savings that can carry them
Yep.
through for a while. And then they have their health, their exercise. But what's going to happen if they catch the coronavirus or one of their grandparents catches it and they have to go to the
Hmm.
emergency unit and every single other person is there? The other sick people that they never cared for or that they never took into account because they just figured it doesn't affect me that all these other people are obese. And
Hmm.
look at this statistic. It's saying 40% of adults age 20 and over were obese. This is 2015, 2016. And one of the things that I mentioned last time we spoke, or I don't, maybe I mentioned it, I don't recall, is that the virus, the uh, mortality rate is higher if you already have conditions like obesity. Well, at least
Hmm.
they discovered in China that if you were a smoker, then you were likely more higher to die if you caught the virus. So men had a higher rate than women because in China men smoke more than women. But then they
Hmm.
said that in the U.S. it may not necessarily be smoking. The one comorbidity that the Americans are going to have is obesity or diabetes, and if you have that and you catch the coronavirus, you have a higher likelihood of being affected. So yeah, so you
Hmm.
might be wealthy and you might think that your hospital is going to be okay and is going to be able to provide treatment for you. But if all the other hospitals are being overwhelmed, the people will eventually end up in the other hospitals. They'll go themselves, even if the ambulance are not routing people from one hospital to another. The people will drive somewhere else where they can get
Yeah.
medical assistance. And because overall the nation as a whole is not so healthy, it affects everyone. And it's rare that you see these situations where the well-being of the whole nation is at play. Usually it's a
Hmm.
very individualistic, I take care of myself and I don't need other people. But in these situations you realize how important it is to make sure that your neighbors or those that live not necessarily right next to you but still within your city, that they would have some way of being prepared when something like this hits.
Yeah, you realize you're in the same boat, you're in the same country, and now you got to fight. So I think it's interesting because it does convey a sense of war. And I know they called the coronavirus the invincible enemy, but in some ways, this is what happened in World War II, right? You're being attacked, your way of life, your life is being threatened by something outside of you, and then you sort of come together as a country, as strong leadership, strong investments, kind of the type of leadership that um, Roosevelt and Churchill and other leaders were able to eventually do after obviously making some mistakes like turning away Jews who were trying to leave Germany as Hitler got into power. But in some ways, it just shows it's that like we're at war, and for the longest time, not the whole population knew what that was like, right? The Gulf Wars have been very televised wars from afar, and now this is something that really threatens everything.
Yeah, but I think we're still a long way from that though, from the point where we unite. You have to suffer a
Yeah, a little
huge,
bit more.
yeah, you have to suffer a huge traumatic event that completely decimates or destroys your entire city, like the way that cities were destroyed in World War II, for people to come together. Right now, we have people that are watching TV at home and they're completely detached from what the situation that's at the hospitals. And then you have people that are running to the stores and hoarding toilet paper, they're hoarding water, and then you have other people that are going to Costco and buying all the wipes and then trying to resell them on eBay at a markup. You still have all
Yeah.
of that opportunistic people trying to make money. There's
Hmm.
we have to go through a lot more before we come together and get over this. You should expect to see a lot more selfishness if the situation gets worse and
Hmm.
more fights. And we haven't heard any cases, but there's going to be a case at some point where somebody was shot or injured or killed because they were fighting over food at the supermarket or there were some argument and one of them didn't have a gun and the other one did.
Hmm.
you, you,
Yep.
you can see a lot more. But I wanted to go back to I wanted to go back to what we were talking about earlier, which was New York, when you mentioned some of the people that we know there, because we not only knew people that came from our circle, from the university circle that we went to school with, but we also, at least in my case, I connected with a lot of the working class community in New York, because when I used to go to eat food, I wouldn't go to the fancy restaurants to eat like $60 duck. I think
What?
they took me there when I interviewed at Bloomberg, right? But that's the only time I ever went there. The other times I'd go to I lived out in Queens in Astoria, and I would go to a Mexican restaurant. Yeah, I took you there a few times.
Yeah,
I would just
so
hang out
good.
there and eat there, and I would get to know everyone that worked there, the waitress, the waiter, the guy, the bartender. And so it's all these people that I'm thinking about, that I'm wondering.
Mm-hmm.
And by the way, not just New York, because you have people like employed in those industries here in LA as well. The construction workers, the
Mm-hmm.
cleaners, the gardeners, all of these guys, if all of a sudden they can't work, especially the immigrant communities, well, where's their safety net and their bailout? A lot of them rent. And did you hear that the state of California now, if you can prove that you lost your job, or that your income has been affected because of the virus, that the bank will give you a pass, essentially waive your mortgage payments for 3 months. That they
Yes,
just
I heard
announced
that.
that 2 days
Yeah.
ago, with the exception of Bank of America, which will just do it for 1 month. So, if anyone listening here banks with Bank of America, make sure to close that account and move it to one of the other banks that at least gave people 3 months. So that provides some relief for the homeowners. But what about the people that rent? And then, uh, like, just think about those interactions. Think about what that interaction is like. So let's say you're working as a cleaner in one of these buildings, that in a bank or building that's shut down. So you no longer work because the building's shut
Mm-hmm.
down and they don't need you to go in. Well, you have to pay rent. So does that mean that you go to your landlord and say, "Well, look, man, I can't pay you the rent because I'm not working, but if you go to this website, you can sign up so that you don't have to pay the mortgage on this home for the next 3 months." You think that's how it's gonna go?
No, because I think some of the owners may know, some of the other folks don't know, and then they'll be like, "Yeah, right, like that can't be true." And then the other owners are probably also struggling themselves and are relying on the money from the renters to pay their mortgage, and maybe some of them will be able to withstand it for some time, but then there might be others who have maybe two, three, four properties, and maybe uh, you know, I guess you have to know how many properties you need to have in order to take advantage of that benefit. But I think obviously and they're going to be needing money too, because some people may be relying on those payments as for the money they need to buy things. So yeah, so it's not going to go down as smoothly as you say, but you're right. I think that's the scariest thing for particularly Latinos, African Americans, minorities, a lot of people lower income who have relatives who work in those areas. You realize that it's they really have nowhere to turn to, and really they can pull resources together. Hopefully, some of them will qualify for the cash assistance that's going to be doled out. Some of them won't because they don't have documents, and so I think it's going to be really these our community really trying to do our best to support each other, to help each other um, through this. So it's going to get a lot worse before it gets any better for a lot of people.
And don't forget the group that is likely the highest percentage of renters these days, which is college students that just got out of college
Hmm.
and are working, but they can't afford the overpriced homes. So what happens with them? And by the way, that cuts across every single group here, not
Hmm.
just Latinos or African Americans. That's going to affect white young people as well, and some of them may end up relocating and going back, moving in with their parents if they can't pay their rent. It depends. It's gonna come down to a lot of variables too. How much savings they have, which is, if you're a college kid, probably not much. You probably have more debt than savings.
Yeah.
And then the the unfortunate thing here is that it's really the savings. It's just a lot of people don't have the savings necessary.
Yeah, and they're not going to or they may not last for a long time. You can have savings that last you for a little bit, but then
Yeah.
you may not. So,
And one thing
and
I'll
I
mention.
think
Go ahead.
and I think before saying the savings, the other piece with our community, I think acknowledging and thanking a lot of the farm workers, janitorial staff who are still working, who now, as a society, we oh yeah, those people are pretty important. And I hope that after this, we actually realize that and compensate them for the true value and the true importance of their labor.
You think society is gonna say that? You're a lot more optimistic.
Boy, I think you got to put it out in the universe, bro.
Yeah,
Once
right.
you put it out in
Positive energy,
the
maybe it
universe
happens.
conspires to make it. So it may not happen, but I think if we as Latinos don't say that and don't express that, I think there's going to be a missed opportunity because
Yeah, no,
you know
yeah,
it's necessary, and
you're
we are got to be the ones that need to acknowledge that, and also make it like yeah, it's true. Like we are critical, and and a lot of the policies and treatment of people also becomes why are we treating undocumented immigrants any less? I mean, look, they're keeping our farms alive. They're feeding us. Like, why would don't we just pass comprehensive immigration reform? Let's get it done and move on with it.
yeah.
So, but yeah, I'm very optimistic.
That's a good plug for that. And it's true though. I mean, I agree with you. We should be reminding people of that all the time because it's very easy to take it for granted. And what you're saying is that right now it won't be as easy to take it for granted because you go to the
Mm-mm.
grocery store and you still see produce. Everything else might be running out, but you still see produce, and that's because of the farm workers and that chain of the industry of getting that supply line is still intact.
Mm-hmm.
And but at the end, when you follow that supply line, the drivers, the people that are working the fields, the people that are cleaning the fruit, all that, yeah, they're still working and they're exposing themselves to risk. Let's hope that you don't have an outbreak in that situation, because then that's going to shut that industry down as well.
Mm-hmm.
And what I was going to mention about the rent was that there are rent protections that people have. So in LA, what is it, 6 months? You could live somewhere for 6 months and you're protected. And
I think that sounds about right.
a landlord has to give you a written notice, and it has to be a 6 month notice that if you don't pay the rent, then you're out. Like I'm
Well,
not.
they and
Yeah.
the mayor in other cities have put a moratorium on both residential and commercial evictions.
Hmm.
So that's even those protections have even extended at during this time.
Yeah. Just think of how uncomfortable and uncomfortable and how tense the situation would be though between renters and landlords if the renters do stop paying their rent, and then the landlords for whatever reason are not able to qualify for the relief where they don't have to pay their mortgage. Like you said, there's so many variables. I don't even know if 3 months it definitely helps, but then there's always that delay. um
But yeah, but that's the thing. So if you have a society, a workforce who has a paid sick leave, who has other type of caregiving leave, or any if or they can still work because they can do the work remotely, or they're going to get some benefit, that helps minimize the problem, because then more people will still be able to work and have money to pay the rent or pay their mortgage, and that lessens the impact, because we are landlords, we have a home, so obviously that this is a very real situation for me, because as a landlord, we don't want to get rich of our tenants, but you also got to cover your mortgage, and you also want to be supportive. And once you find good tenants, you want to keep them, because you will realize how difficult it is to have good tenants who take care of your property, who pay on time, and who are not, you know, doing crazy things at your house. So as a landlord, you also value good tenants, and you want to keep them. And in the past, we've done this. Like we've said, you know what, you were laid off, you still have the deposit, hopefully you get a job or some way to pay us. So you also got to be, so we have chosen to be flexible, because we appreciate our tenants and we appreciate how difficult it can be, but it's only, if we were not to get um uh, uh a time to not pay our mortgage, then we could get in trouble, and then we would be one of those families who potentially have to sell it or something, right? So and obviously it's a privileged position to say that you have property. Not a lot of people do. But those are some of the ways that I think could play out as this goes into any further.
Yeah, we have to see what that process is going to look like because there's a lot of opportunity for people abusing this,
Yep.
and so let's say that your tenants are not able to pay you the rent. Okay, you go to the bank and you tell them, I can't pay you the mortgage on this house because I'm no longer receiving money from my tenants. Was the bank going to say, well, you're not receiving money from the tenants, but show us what you have in your savings and checking account? Because if you have money there, then maybe you have to keep paying the mortgage.
Mm,
Or they might turn around and say, we need documented proof that your tenants were affected by the virus and that they didn't just choose to stop making the payments on their own. And
hmm.
the bank is you're not gonna call the bank as an owner and tell them that you can't make the mortgage payment because your tenants didn't pay, and they're not gonna say, okay, that's fine, we'll waive your payment. Dude, they're not gonna say that. I mean, they're
They
banks.
have investors. Yeah, they need that money.
Well, they're
They
there
need
to
that
like
money to pay that
screw you
out.
over and take your money, and they'll find a way to get the money. So this is gonna be. We'll start hearing the stories afterwards as to how all this played out. But I think right now people are getting the false sense that this is gonna somehow help things. It might end up making a lot of things worse. And you have a situation where uh, some people will exploit this, and then others, essentially they're picking winners and losers in this situation. There's the all these people. I think I had a rant about this last time about this so-called free market in America, where all these people are always talking about praising the free market and the free market and let the free market fix itself. And just if you just let the medical industry be free market, it would sort itself out. It's like all
Hmm.
of that BS. Like, where's the free market
Nope.
now? If
No,
you
you
have,
need government to step in and safeguard and do investments and keep those markets afloat, which is precisely what they did this week. That they just yesterday they passed and signed a over 2 trillion bill to. Yes, I think the good thing is that I think the Democrats in the House and the Senate were able to negotiate some good benefits for workers and working families. But obviously, a good chunk of that is going to industry. A good chunk of that is going to small businesses who are struggling. Going back to states to help pay for unemployment, uh, for people to get more, paid sick leave, and then some other investments for hospitals and things like that. So I think now you need your government to step up, and they stepped up in a significant way. But it's not going to be the only bill that's going to be needed, particularly if things continue to be worse. And that's where the desire that has been expressed to go back sooner than that is medically advisable is problematic, because if the virus and the spread is not eradicated by then, we can be in this again, which will be troubling. And it will be like, no, do it right. Just contain it, flatten the curve, build up your capacity to address to have enough beds and things like that. Um, and let's handle it. Let's do it right. And then after that, we can go and build a better economy and start things. So
yeah,
ideally, but obviously that may not be the way it plays out.
yeah, I'm still trying to process how I feel about the Fed stepping in once again, like they did in 2008, and bailing out the economy,
Well,
because
as you process that, the problematic thing is that since rates have been so low, that there's really nowhere, not anything more than that the Fed can do. I mean, yes, they can do other things like acquire bonds and buy back stock, but at least as it relates to being able to control the rates, they cannot. They don't have as much flexibility or room to maneuver now because of how low the rates were before this hit.
yeah, but well, they still have a lot of options, and they've clearly shown them because they've essentially borrowed money from the people to then bail out the economy. and they're gonna bail it out by giving some of that money back to the people, making loans available for businesses, buying bonds. I think they even said that they're gonna start buying municipal bonds. So not
Hmm.
only the bonds that the Treasury issues, but also the municipal bonds, buying corporate debt. So they're the buyer of last resort. They're buying everything.
Hmm.
So, but the problem is, first of all, where's that money coming from? Is it's saddling the future generations with
It's debt.
with
I
debt
mean,
for
it's
future
debt.
generations. And look, here's the thing. Why I tell you why I'm still processing it is because even okay, fine. Apart from all of the problems that I have with the Fed bailing out again this supposed free market economy, right? It's only free market up until the wealthy get in trouble because of all their gambling, and then they want to be bailed out. Look, if you look at the where the $2 trillion is going, and let me see if I can pull up a chart. Let me see, maybe $2 trillion allocation. You're gonna see that a lot of that money is not gonna go to the people.
No.
It's you could consider it breadcrumbs that they're giving to the people. And let's see, I had seen a graphic before. Let's see. Oh, I think allocation.
Allocation.
It's this, yeah, pay package. So public health, state and local government, small businesses, individuals, big corporations.
Hmm.
So half a trillion goes to the corporations, 377 small businesses, state and local governments, public health, and then the individuals. The portion that goes to the individuals. So see, I'm not opposed to bailouts, but the problem is that this bailout is completely disproportionate because the common person is getting breadcrumbs while the big corporations are not only get to sustain whatever profits they've made in the last 10 years, but they get to
Hmm.
stay afloat and they get access to more money. Because it's not
Hmm.
really a $2 trillion package, is it now? Isn't it more like 6 trillion? Where 2 trillion is for allocated for a certain purpose, and then the other 4 trillion is for the Fed to go and buy treasuries and bonds, and I'm not sure what else. But the problem that I have with this is think about something like a Boeing corporation, right? So essentially too big to fail. That's the problem.
Hmm.
And that corporation has stockholders and board members. And they've been riding this stock market all the way up in the last 10 years, making
Yep.
profits, making a killing. And they've essentially, what Boeing was doing was, weren't they buying back their own stock, borrowing cheap money from the Fed, buying back their own stock and inflating their own stock price, and then
Yep.
making a ton of money, taking out that money, and then buying assets with it. That's a huge risk that they took. And now
Hmm.
that the economy is in trouble and they're in trouble, they're getting bailed out. So there's no repercussions for all the risk that they took and all the money they made off of it. The
Well,
taxpayer is now funding that.
not only that, so not only did they benefit from the great economy, the government is bailing out, but now they have cash to buy stocks that are now lower because the economy is down. So that means that they can potentially make even more money from those investments and get more market share.
Yeah, and then
And
they're
and and a
yeah,
lot of them are sort of in that sweet spot. They get bailed out by government, and a lot of their businesses and things like that are it's gonna be making money now and for the foreseeable future. So they're set for life.
and a lot of these small businesses will not survive, and essentially these big corporations are going to come and consolidate. They're going to buy them out
Hmm.
for pennies on the dollar. So it's a huge reallocation of wealth, no matter how you put it.
Yeah,
And
and a lot of wealth that's going to be lost from those small businesses who were, good, solid businesses, and probably the son or daughter or somebody else within the family or even the own employees were going to take over. Now that wealth building opportunity is going to be gone, a significant number of them will be gone.
but then the next, at least for me, the next logical question is, okay, uh don't bail anybody out. Is that even is I'm not
Mm-mm.
saying that's what we do. I'm just posing the question, what would happen if the Fed doesn't step in and bail out the economy?
A lot more pain. not only a lot more pain, a lot more pain for folks on top,
Mm-hmm.
and I don't know what it would be hard to say because in some ways that type of pain could be the lesson that the people at top need to realize that, oh, what you're doing was fucked up. We should realize that we need to be, distribute wealth more equally, create more opportunity. So that's the kind of, something like that where you lost your stock, you lost your business, you lost a few million dollars, you lost, your two of your vacation homes, etc. That then would people at top would feel that pain. But and it'll be interesting to see whether that would how they will react to that. And I
Yeah.
think there's something to be said how you deal. And I know you kind of mentioned it when we started at this conversation, but when you how you deal with crisis, depending on what position of life, if you're in a position of privilege versus somebody who has struggled, like you deal with crisis very differently. And in some ways, when you come from a privileged background, you may not be as well prepared to deal with crises because you have had it so easy for so long that you kind of forget what it was to struggle.
Yeah, we touched on that last time, and I agree with that. And the point that I was trying to make with this bailout is that it the part of me feels that at this point, complaining and arguing about the bailout and so forth, it it's meaningless in a way because see the problem is not the bailout, and the problem is not even that the bailout is happening the way that it is. The problem is that if you don't do this bailout, the entire economy collapses. So the bailout is essentially a natural reaction based on the system that we have in place. It's by
Hmm.
design.
Yeah, no, it is.
And
So
so,
you're trying to say that it's an opportunity to look at the whole entire system?
well, but they're not, because that's the whole point of why the system is structured this way. It's a very simple trick. You design the system in such a way that you reap all the benefits up until a certain point, but when that day of reckoning comes, that you have to like be exposed for your crimes, you say,
Hmm.
well, yeah, you can try to expose me, but if you expose me, we all die, or like everything goes to hell. So you
The
you
whole
essentially,
economy
yeah,
collapses.
exactly. So you essentially take away the option of people to, and it's a really look, man. If I'm not even upset that this is how it works, because this is a really brilliant way to steal money from the people. Because all what they've done essentially is exactly that. They've told us that we have a great economy, just borrow money, buy your house, go to college, pay your debts, do all this stuff. Trust us, we know what we're doing. We have a free market economy, and corporations would be held responsible. If a corporation is not efficient, blah blah blah, it should go out of business. These corporations, Boeing, part of them probably knew that if the next economic recession is big enough to threaten them, to threaten a Boeing, it's also big enough to threaten every other corporation that
Yeah,
is
but
at the same level as them. Which
yeah,
means
but it's
that,
funny because with
yeah,
Boeing, like the fact that there's a break in and travel got kind of gives them a time to keep working on their fixing their jet.
yeah. But what I'm trying to say is that these guys knew that they could gamble. They could gamble big to reap in the rewards, because if anything was going to affect them, it probably meant that it was affecting the whole economy, and then they could
Hmm.
get bailed out. Now
Yeah.
there's a gamble in that, but they probably had a high confidence that would be the situation, and sure enough, they get bailed out. So they already know how the system works, and they get to exploit it. And to me, it's no different than, again, like a playground situation where you can manage to swindle all of your classmates out of in the game to put them in a situation where you get all the benefit up until the end, and then at the end you tell them, oh, actually we have to change the rules, because if we don't, then everything goes to hell. It's a
Yeah,
very
and a
simple
lot of these
strategy.
families have been playing that game for many, many generations.
Yeah, and I don't know if you could change it, because it's. I mean, the only way that you change it is the whole system has to collapse. There's no other, like, if it's intact, and I'm not saying I want it to collapse, because I do know that the system collapsing is on itself uh, would bring
Bad
about
news.
catastrophic changes. I'm just observing how the system works, and to me, it's really messed up that the corporations get bailed out. But when it happened, I wasn't surprised. I mean, I wasn't surprised that they got bailed out in 2008, and then they're getting bailed out again. What concerns me is how much money can the Fed keep borrowing from the future generations before before it's too much. I mean, if we could borrow 2 trillion, 2 trillion, why not another two? Why not four? Why not six? Why not 100 trillion? I
Well,
mean,
yeah, we can,
but
but
then
then the government doesn't, the only thing that's backing that debt is the fact that there's a belief that the United States government will be be standing and be able to, marshal its resources. So when you talk about collapse, I mean, that's why one of the reasons why conservatives used to be so concerned about the national debt, because having debt, going back to, not being physically healthy, not being financially healthy, brings problems and can bite you in the ass when a crisis comes. So that's the problem, because like if we have way more debt than it starts impacting our ability to pay for things, and then there's disruptions in the systems, and the whole system can potentially go down, or will be seriously crippled,
but
and
if
then it will be a whole different
right,
conversation.
but if we can't pay for something, that means that we've run out of money, so we can just print more money
Yeah.
to pay for it. So then we can keep printing money indefinitely.
Well, we
What?
can, but there will come a point where it will be like, and I
But
hate to say this, but it will be kind of like Venezuela.
right, but see, um, we've already printed 2 trillion, and our debt is already 6 trillion because we never really recovered from 2008. So we have 6 trillion, right? I mean,
Hmm.
under any normal circumstances, anybody would have said, "Man, that's way too much money. This country can't repay it. They're gonna have to devalue their currency, and we're not gonna let them borrow money anymore." But other governments are still participating with our economy. They're still buying dollars. They're still buying our debt. So
Hmm.
obviously they still. So here's the thing. Here's what I'm trying to get at. Whether or not other countries believe that they trust the U.S. that the U.S. can repay its debt, because I'm sure Russia and China, they're convinced that the U.S. will not be able to pay its debt. The only reason that the only thing that's keeping the U.S. economy afloat is that we still have the biggest gun, and we still have it pointed at everyone else. So that
So you're saying that the capitalist system is still the best system?
well, to the extent that it allowed this country to get so powerful that we can have the biggest military and point our guns at everyone.
Yep.
I mean, we're just holding the whole world hostage, because there's no other country that would be able to print so much money and still have a viable economy. We have
Yep.
it because there's so much. We're so integrated. Well, what do you think would happen tomorrow if a small country, or even maybe China or Russia, have said, you know what, we're gonna dump all of our U.S. treasuries because we don't trust that the United States is what's the word, solvent anymore, that they can
Hmm.
repay back their debt. Well, first of all, that would we're so integrated, again by design, that would essentially cripple China's economy. But let's say that
Hmm.
China is willing to have a downturn so that they can then come back up independent of like the American empire. Well, if China were to do that, the very next day we would have a declaration of war passed in Congress that China is taking actions to subvert the freedom of the America, and that they are now an enemy that needs to be whatever. They would come up with an excuse and they would just invade. So the whole world knows what the scam is, but they can't do anything about it. So as long as like that's the case, I don't know what, the U.S. government could print another 4, 6, 10 trillion, and it may not do anything. I mean, it may keep the bubble alive, and it may keep us going, but I don't think you may not see hyperinflation or any of that stuff. I'm just speculating, obviously, but this is
Hmm.
this is how it this is how I see it.
That's both reassuring and scary at the same time.
Well,
I
how
mean,
much money?
reassuring
Yeah.
because in some ways kind of reassures that there's a continuation that's pretty secure, but it's kind of scary because then that sort of just opens the the door for a lot of carelessness.
Yeah, well, which we have though. I mean,
Yeah.
look at all the gambling and the risk that's been going on in Wall Street. Part of it because they know that they could get bailed out if the catastrophe is big enough. So you wouldn't want to gamble just a little bit, because if you gamble a little bit and lose, no one's gonna care. What you do is you gamble big, because if you gamble big and then uh, things go south, then you need to get bailed out because the gamble was so big to begin with. Like with the housing market in 2008. Like they knew what they were doing. They knew that they were driving up prices, inflating the housing bubble. They they probably also knew that they would get bailed out if that thing ever collapsed, and then we would reinflate the bubble again. And unfortunately, what ends up happening is when the Fed pushes interest rates down, that means that whatever money you have held in the bank is not going to give you any return on your investment. You're not getting any interest. So
Mhm.
all the while, the people just get poorer. So it hurts. At the end of the day, it affects the the common person, and the future generations that are getting saddled with a ton of debt.
Go big or go home. Yeah, that's a good point. I mean, because when you think about, and that's problematic, because if you think about a lot of our population is getting ready to retire, and because of this economic recession and their savings not growing, they're gonna have a lot less money to be able to live in retirement or live after their, for a long time. So that's gonna impact a lot of people, particularly as they're getting ready for that. For the
Then we dropped. Then we dropped Eduardo there for a second. I'm gonna try to get him back. Just bear with me. I'll just call him again. Lucho, luchador. Hello.
oh,
I think I dropped you there for a second. Are you there?
yeah, here were you
Okay.
able to record?
Yeah, the screen is it's still recording. You're fine. We lost the audio for a second. But you were saying about
Okay.
the those that are about to retire potentially being at high risk because they may lose the entire retirement.
Yeah, so like to the your point, the point that you made, you know now your savings are going to grow less, they're going to last less, and that's going to impact your ability to live as long as we are all living, in some cases, because better quality of life, better health care. So that's going to impact a lot of people as they get ready to enter that new stage of life. So and to your point, that's the problem. Like it's right now the system is such that it just keeps taking and taking from working middle class families, and it's all going in one direction, and that's not a that's not a healthy system. That's not a system that it's going to be able to withstand a social crisis, a health crisis, or another type of crisis. So
Yeah, it's not
it's just we're
sustainable.
all interrelated, right? It's in playing out to the model. Like you're right. I think now we're so interdependent. Whether you're American, Chinese, Russian, Latin American, we it's all one world, and this pandemic in some ways is impacting us all, but I think there can be other things in the futures that also kind of makes it clear. You know what? If and it does, right? Because this started out in China, traveled throughout the world, just in how other diseases have started in other parts, um, and we're all interconnected. And as such, we should be taking care of ourselves, not because it's profitable, because it's the right thing to do, and it can be profitable and better for everyone.
Yeah, man, I'm with you. I think we just have to convince the 1%.
I
Yeah, let's go and see if they buy that. But by the way, Trump's still trying to call the virus the Chinese or the Wuhan
Yeah,
virus.
it's ridiculous.
I don't know. Look, they call us they call the Spanish flu. They call it the Spanish flu, right? So there's some
Mm.
precedent there. Uh, ultimately, I'm not as concerned about what they call it. What's annoying is that he's making a big deal about it right now. Look, if you want to call it the Chinese virus later, once it gets documented, whatever. Like I said, it's you call it the Spanish virus, you can call it the Chinese virus. But he's just why does it matter right now? It's it's irrelevant at least to me.
No, making political points
Yeah, exactly. And it's, I mean, the guy is racist. I'm not even
and
gonna
keeping the
accuse.
racist flames alive. Of
Yeah,
course,
so
you gotta.
I'm not even arguing whether or not the guy is. I'm not gonna call him racist because that's besides the point. The guy is a racist. There's no point in arguing. I mean, he said it. There's so much documented statements that he's made. There's the way that he is sexist. He is racist, and if you're not gonna call him racist, at the most, he's like severely culturally insensitive. But doesn't matter. One thing that I wanted to say, uh, sorry, when you're talking about the elderly people, is the gardeners when they come and they mow the neighbor's lawn. Because I do work from home, I do see them when they come. They have what looks to me to be a 70-year-old man that's still working with them,
Oh
Latino.
my God.
Yeah, and that's very common in the immigrant community, that you work up
Yeah.
until a certain age because there's no safety net. Well, Americans may start getting more and more familiar with that situation too, if they can't
Hmm.
retire and they have to go to work and they're 60, 70 bagging groceries or doing whatever it is, at whatever job they can find at that age, because it's really hard to retrain and to go back to school and to learn something else. So they're if they need the money, they're gonna need to get whatever job they can. And so, yeah, it's not looking good right now. Hopefully that, I don't know, it's $2 trillion. I don't know what the stock market went down. Now it's recovering a little bit, but those 401ks are still down overall since the
Hmm.
whole crisis started. And not only that, if inflation cuts away at the value of their money, then that's going to be a problem too. So,
Yeah.
cool. Any
A
final
lot of
thoughts?
uncertainty.
Any final thoughts before we I'm trying to let's try to keep it to an hour so that we don't go over by too much.
Okay.